Start our streaming of our meeting. So welcome to everyone. This is the Scott County Fiscal Court September 11th, 2020 regular meeting. This meeting is being hosted from the Scott County Courthouse, 101 East Main Street, Georgetown, Kentucky. It's being broadcast live through the Scott County Fiscal Court YouTube page. Public attendance will not be permitted at this meeting due to the contagious nature of COVID-19 and social distance requirements. Public comments have been accepted prior to this meeting, and I don't believe we have any. Before we start our regular agenda, we're going to call to order a public hearing meeting for the purpose of hearing citizen comments regarding the real property and tangible personal property rates. So I'm calling that meeting to order. And on August 27th, 2020, Fiscal Court voted to maintain and keep the current rate, which is .062 per $100. A vote to affirm or change the rate will be taken after the public hearing today. All interested citizens were invited to submit verbal or written comments, and that was published in the Georgetown Graphic. 2019 actual tax rate was .062 per 100 with revenue of $2,646,567. The 2020 proposed tax rate will be held the same at .062 .100 with proposed revenue of $2,986,625. The 2020 compensating tax rate would be at .061 per 100 with expected revenue of $2,938,454. The revenue expected from new property of $88,175 and the revenue expected from personal property of $233,830. Excess revenues to be allocated to the general fund to aid in funding personnel and services. So with that said, after our advertisement, we received no comment. And if there's no comment from the court, I will close this public hearing at this time. Are there any comments from anyone in the court? With that said, I'll close the hearing and move on with our regular agenda. And we'll start our regular agenda. I'd like to ask everyone, before we say the Pledge of Allegiance, today is 9/11. And out of respect and remembrance for all those that lost their lives on 9/11 19 years ago, I'd like to ask the court and anyone else to join me in a moment of silence out of respect for those individuals. So if you do that this time, I'd appreciate it. Thank you all very much. I'd like to just ask the court at this time to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'd like to ask Stacy Hamilton to call the roll.
Mr. Hostetler?
Here.
Mr. Lyons?
Here.
Mr. Wallace?
Here.
Mr. Corman?
Present.
Mr. Ellison?
Here.
Mr. Burke?
Here.
Mr. Livingston?
Here.
Mr. Marshall?
Here.
Judge Covington?
Here. With that said, I'll move on down to number 6 in our agenda. I'd like to ask the court to offer any comments and review for the minutes as they were presented from our last meeting in your packet. Are there any comments or questions related to those minutes as presented?
Motion to approve.
Motion from Mr. Kelly Corman to approve, and there's a second from Mr. Rick Hostetler. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 7, as presented in your packet, is the transfers for your review. Are there any questions or comments related to those transfers as presented? Motion from Mr. Hostetler to approve. Is there a second? A second from Mr. Alvin Lyons. Any other questions or comments related to those? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 8, bills and hand checks, as presented in your packet. Are there any questions or comments related to the bills and hand checks as presented? Motion from Mr. David Livingston. Is there a second?
Second.
A second from Mr. Chad Wallace. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, let the record reflect that shares fees of $38,170.13 were presented. And let the record reflect that clerk fees of $206,488.66 were presented. Number 10, tax rate. Is there any questions or comments before we consider a vote in regards to proposed tax rate of .062 on property, real property? Motion to approve from Mr. Alvin Lyons. Is a second from Mr. Chad Wallace. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. One no.
Just to explain my vote, I'm still taking compensated.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Number 11, Road Department new hire. Mr. Mudrack, JR, would you all like to present to the court?
Yeah, thank you, Judge, Magistrates. On JR's behalf, we're pleased to recommend the appointment of an equipment operator and laborer. His name is Robert Dougherty. He comes to us with about more than 24 years of experience operating equipment and doing labor and work very related to what we need here. Given his experience, we're recommending his starting wage be $16.11 an hour, and then his tentative first day of employment will be September 21st. So, anything else to add, JR? Okay.
Does he have a CDL?
He does not.
Okay.
How many applicants are we having when we're posting stuff like this?
Well, we had worked on 20, 25, somewhere in that neighborhood, so not as many as we would like for this position, but we're doing pretty well but we have, unfortunately, 4 more positions to fill. So we've got some work ahead of us.
So,
Same type of, when you say four of the very similar type?
Very same exact position, yes.
so are you pulling from those applicants, those 20 applicants, for you try to fill in those positions, or are the applicants not qualified enough for us to
Well,
get 3 other?
We chose about 5 that we're going to interview next week.
Right.
Okay.
That have some similar qualifications. Only one had a CDL that applied.
Okay.
And just a side conversation, we have been doing some research in regards to CDL and what other agencies and county governments do. And Jeff's gathered some information. I'm not ready to really talk about that right now, but we have tried to gather some information. I talked to Kelly Baker, and with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, they have a policy. If you come in with a CDL, they're going to give you a 5% add-on right off the top. So we're trying to gather information. There's no question that that there's a concern going into winter. We don't want to leave our road department shorthanded, and it's not an easy task to be out there scraping, snow in the middle of the night and not know where you're at or not be experienced. So it's important. Jeff and JR, I'd open for any comment there, and then we have a recommendation. Rick has a question as well.
Well, first of all, I don't mind making a motion, I know Gerald would help, but I'd also like to make a few comments. After our workshop, I got to thinking about it when I found out that, we lost 3 guys that were pretty good at the snowplow, which we're still, now we're really looking for 4 more to get back up to staffing
That's right.
levels, right? After Robert, yeah. Well, I got thinking about it, and my thoughts went all the way back to probably last year, and everybody on the court knows we've had issues in all departments. And that's why we went through the salary survey and did all of those things, which I think were all positive. But, and Jeff, maybe you can remember this, I don't remember the numbers, but I'm just gonna kind of rattle, it's gonna sound like that, but I have a point to make. Weren't there about 75 countywide employees that weren't affected, didn't get a raise, didn't get any kind of bump? I don't remember if that number is accurate or not, but it seems like it was around that. And my point is this, I own a small business, and we have 20, 25 employees, sometimes 30, at any given time. But over time, we have a lot of guys that have been with us a long time. But I remember thinking back when we were making all the adjustments, and all those were positive, but I remember thinking that it kind of bothered me that we had that many employees that didn't get any kind of a bump. And I know the salary survey, that was what that was all about, trying to get things where they're supposed to be in comparison to like jobs and like communities. But in my world, if you're gonna do something, you gotta do something for all your folks on some kind of a basis. And if they're not worth doing something for, probably don't need them, you know what I'm saying? So I'm just thinking about that, and then I was kind of a little bit shocked when JR said, he had 3 snowplow drivers leaving, and I know, we all know winter's coming. And so they're in that position, they're just as, they're an important asset to the community. I mean, heaven forbid, we don't need winters like we've had here. I live where I could get out my driveway for 2 weeks back in the early 90s. And I believe it had the interstate shut down the snow had the interstate shut down from Grant County to the Yellowstone Mountains. I remember that. I lived here and literally couldn't get out my driveway for 2 weeks. And I had a tractor and a plow, and it was deep. But, so so I thought back to EMS last year, and Brandon came up with that idea, which I thought was a great one, about the education piece, where, folks, and it was all about trying to maintain and keep our existing employees. So I say all that to say this, that I'm just a little bit concerned about, this is a big hit to me. I don't know what you guys say, but it's kind of a big hit because winter's approaching, and I'm hoping we have a mild winter like we've had. That saves everybody. But I don't have control of that, none of us do. But I just don't want to get in that spot again. I think we've kind of solved things with EMS, and I think we've addressed some issues with the jail. I think we've helped a little bit in that turnover. And I just was kind of shocked when now I found out it was actually 5 people. I thought, maybe I misunderstood, but last week I thought it just said 3, but that's okay. Anyhow, I guess the question is, are we doing enough? That salary, starting salary 1611, that sounds a little bit more than other folks. Do we have guys out there now that are making less? Because I know what that would do in my company. I'm just thinking out loud here.
I do, Rick, and it's caused some morale and issue problems.
So can I counterpoint that?
Sure.
So I work for a
That's why I'm
company,
bringing it up.
our insurance division has nearly 400 employees. Our total company has about 17,000. there's a salary
I'm
scale.
not that big, David.
I know, but that's my point, is when you start getting with 200, 250, and I'm speaking not as an HR person, but I've got a feeling that Jeff may agree with me. When you start getting to 100, 200, 250, 300 employees, you have to firm up how people are paid. And, you know, there are always gonna be people unhappy. I mean, we've already seen it on social media. We just did all these adjustments and changes and implementing salary and wage scales and all these other things, what, 10 months ago? And there's already
We worked a lot last year.
mumbling, you know, on social media, which there's always mumbling on social media about something. But, you know, in your scenario with 25 or so employees, it's a lot easier for you to do that because you don't have people scattered out everywhere. And it's a little easier for being the business owner, which we're not the business owners, we're just the caretaker of the taxpayer dollars. We have to set some kind of framework, which is why we brought Jeff in as part of that, was to set a framework to make sure that we're treating everybody as equitable as possible, which is why we went back and looked at what was your prior experience, because if you had prior experience, it could justify you having another increase. And those 75 or so people that did not see an increase, if you go back and look at the data, a lot of them were 110, 115% of where they should have been. So they've been blessed that we didn't have the salary scale in place in the past. They've been making more than they probably would have had we had the salary scale in for the last 2 years. So, you know, it's one of those things where, is there flexibility? Yes, but when you get to this size that our county government is with employees, it has to stay pretty rigid, because then you do something for one and you don't do it for another, and then all of a sudden you lose all the structure, and it's a house of cards and it all comes down, and then why did we do what we even did? And then you run the risk of discrimination, lawsuits, you know, I'm not getting paid what I should get paid because I've got more experience than that person, and it's just, I would prefer to stick to a structure, and if there is a legitimate change that needs to be made, take those changes one by one. Not just say, well, this position should make this because that person makes more than that person. It just needs to be a one-off thing, and then, and address it in that manner.
And I agree and understand that, David, and, appreciate all the hard work Jeff has put in on all this salary structure and everything. And talked to the judge about it, talked to Jeff a couple of times in the last week. I thought one of the simplest way would be to have a little bit more of a CDL incentive than 50 cents an hour of what we got to try to maintain these guys.
I think you have to build that. I don't think you do an incentive. I think you change the pay structure for, you have a new job. You have a different job description versus one versus the other. I don't like incentives. I don't like 50, you know, quarter here, a dime there, because those things at the end of the day,
Well, that
at
might
the end of the day, they don't add up to a lot.
might not be the proper
And
incentive.
I also, if we pay you, train you for your CDL, I'd like to know what it costs us from an equity standpoint, manpower, hours, everything, equipment. What would somebody have to pay to go get their CDL if they paid a private entity to get the training?
$4,000.
Okay?
They guarantee you in 4 weeks, and it all depends on the individual on how much time we spend.
So we're possibly saving them $4 grand from having to go to a private company.
Yes.
So at some point, I know I worked in a job, one of my first jobs, and I wanted some specific training, and I got that training, but I had a contract with that company. And if I left, I had to repay that training. And it was, you know,
Prorated.
Yeah, it's prorated. And I wouldn't care to look at that.
And that's a private company, $4,000. If we train them, it all depends on the individual, how quickly they learn and pick up everything. It could cost us,
But I think you look at how much it
$2,500.
costs if you have to go do it out there.
yeah,
$4,000,
Yeah.
we're giving you a $4,000 training.
yep.
If you had to go do it on your own, I wouldn't care that if you get that kind of certification, that if you're gonna leave us, that you have to repay
I'll ask Jeff to look into that. Bill's been waiting. Bill Burke, go ahead.
Judge, in looking at our CDL issue, we give a 50-cent adder for a person with a commercial driver's license. It's $20 a week, $80 a month, approximately $800 a year. That's not a lot. I mean, I've got to tell you, if I was there and I was making, pretty good buck, and somebody said, hey, we want you to go get your commercial driver's license, and we're going to use you as a first responder to drive the snowplow every time it snows, 50 cents an hour probably wouldn't motivate me at all. I think it probably needs to be more, and I think that will help JR's issue, because it's difficult to attract folks when you say we're going to give you 50 cents an hour if you have a commercial driver's license. I think it probably needs to be, $1, $1.50. Okay, I mean, these folks are the elite. They're the ones we count on to go out there and plow those roads and salt those roads, pull people out of ditches and help move trees and everything else. I don't think we need to change our basic pay structure much. I think we need to change the premium we pay for commercial driver's license.
Thank you, Bill. Rick had another comment.
Just real quick, it's kind of what I wanted to do to generate this discussion, and that's another reason why I brought up the EMS, when we did the education piece, and there is a contract type of agreement. If we pay for their education, they gotta work, they gotta commit to the work and so on. So, and that's what we're throwing out here. So I think some pretty good ideas. I'm just looking for a way to shore up, now it sounds like the road department, because I know we've done things to try to shore up the jail and get their employees where they need to be. So when I heard this last week, it just kind of generated all this thought process. And I'm glad it's generated this discussion.
To your point, Rick, in private industry, we call that golden handcuffs. Okay, I'm going to send you out for training, I'm going to invest time and money in you, and as a result, you're going to sign an agreement that says you're going to stay with me and do this job for 2 years, and if you leave prior to 2 years, you're going to repay, what we invested on a prorated basis. I don't know that you do that in municipal government, but certainly private industry does.
I think it's tougher. And what you also run into when you try to get money back from people, I know payroll and all, when an employee ends up trying to resign to move on to another job and they end up paying back or getting that last check zeroed out, I think that creates a lot of issues with all your employees, that might have to do that it might be a great reason. And now we're punishing them for whatever reason. It might be a family issue. It might be all kinds of issues.
Yeah, and you also have the consequence of maybe having to take them to court to recoup that money.
Yeah, I mean, are we going to do that? Are we really going to?
I think we looked at this before with officers, deputy sheriffs, I guess it was, and talked to Rich Ornstein, and I have a vague recollection there was some issues with that. We can touch base with him again, but.
Sure. But yeah, it's worth investigating, and I'd be glad to look into that, so.
Well, that's what I'm kind of looking for.
That's the main point.
We're all 5 of us, the ones that left, they all CDL drivers, probably 4 of them.
Yeah.
And, here's the other thing too. And probably shouldn't even bring this up, but how important is the retirement to them? If the retirement is not important, then why keep new hires in the retirement system?
We can't do it. We can't separate.
I believe.
Well,
Richmond did.
Well,
Madison did.
we looked at this with the this is when Judge Leslie was here, and we looked at it with EMS. We went down that
You can't
path.
move your current employees out, but I believe you can move, when you move forward, your new hires can be out of the retirement system. And I'm not saying have that discussion, but nobody ever talks about that. And that is a big piece, and that used to mean a lot, the retirement aspect of it. And so, I'm just throwing that out there because it is up for discussion.
Rick, or David, I think it's a good idea. I mean, if a spouse has a good insurance plan that can pick somebody up and we can pay them $4,000 more a year,
whatever we think would be equitable, that's a pretty big bump.
Now, you're talking about insurance, I'm talking about retirement.
Yeah. Can you not pay it?
They move some of their folks out of the hazardous duty. I don't think they're pulling out.
Well, I'm sorry.
That might be.
I'm sorry, David, you're right.
Some out of hazardous duty.
That's right. You might.
Well-
Sounds like it's worth looking into, yeah.
Well, but here's the thing too, and I've mentioned this to the court before. Remember that anybody that gets hired after 2014 is in Tier 3 retirement.
Correct.
There's not the great retirement plan that those that have prior service are. So we've got to be looking more at the trade-off, making sure that the psychological contract of employment is there, that we're providing benefits or pay that makes a person want to stay here. And it's not just that, it's also the work environment, that plays a key role.
We haven't passed on the health insurance increase to employees in probably, it might be 4 or 5 years.
Only once since I've been here.
Yeah, it's been longer than that.
I mean, it's, and when you look at getting anywhere from a 9 to a 14% increase probably,
Yeah.
year in and year out, and that adds up to significant money. That stays in the employee's pocket, that they're not having to pay.
Right. And with our joining that pharmacy coalition, it's probably going to insulate people against an increase again this year. So that's another positive thing. You're right.
But I mean, we just got to make sure that, those are things that everybody needs to be reminded of, because if you stay focused on one aspect of the job and all it is pay, well, we can change the benefits and we can take that premium down for the county and offer other plans if you want more money in your pocket, but we did that, we looked at that.
A few years ago.
Yeah, probably 3 or 4 years ago, and the benefit of it is you couldn't get enough to pay the employees more to offset what the increased cost was on the health insurance side.
Yeah.
It was gonna be detrimental to the employees, so we stuck with what we were doing.
Say that again.
We looked at high deductible health plans.
Right.
We looked at,
I remember.
higher co-pays and all that.
Right.
But the amount of money that it would save employees was negligible.
Okay.
So- And the amount of money it would save the county was to be able to pass it back on in the form of a pay increase was negligible. It was more detrimental to the employee. It would cost them when they had to pay their out-of-pockets, it was gonna cost them a whole lot more money each year than it was with our plan that we have now.
If I can just share one comment, this is great discussion, I appreciate it, is JR and I had a really long meeting yesterday about this very issue and kind of brainstormed on opportunities, and I think JR has a much better understanding of, all the data and everything. So I think we had a really good, informational meeting yesterday, and he understands the dilemma. And I think, and I want you to know too, Rick, that it was about 50 people who throughout this process that didn't get a pay adjustment. I can assure you that I looked at every single one of those people 2 and 3 times over in their position comparisons to make sure we were being as absolutely fair as possible. And I think JR even saw from the work we did yesterday that I erred even in the employee's favor in many occasions when doing the comparisons and trying to be as proactive and as good as we could to prepare this county for the future too. I mean, knowing that it's growing and things, and we need to recruit talented people. So it's not an easy task. But I guess what I want to say is that JR and Judge Covington and I are going to be working together on some ideas, and I think I have an idea. I need to go back to my office this afternoon and work on it. And I think we'll have a solution. I think we'll have a solution probably to present at the next court meeting, So give us some time. I hear what you're saying. I appreciate the conversation. And I think we'll try to address this issue as best we can. Does that sound fair to everybody? Is that?
What was the 10-5 of that? How long did they? Probably 18 months to 4 years.
And
That's how long they've been with us.
if I can share, you got to look at the reason why some of these people left. 2 abandoned their job. 1 went to Montana, and then 2.
With our help,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. And then 2, money probably did play a role. So I guess where we got to look to see is now, are we struggling to refill those positions? And I guess we'll know more in the next week. You know, if we can't get people to accept the job for the pay we're offering, then that is an even greater indication that we're having struggles. And even the fellow that we're dealing with today, you know, I sense that he would have liked to have earned more money than we're offering. And I think everybody's right here. When you have, I'm not going to be able to hire somebody with, 25 and 30 years of experience at the starting wage. It's just not going to happen. And it'd be great to have talented people that help prepare this county for the future, if we can get them. And that's not to say that the people who are here are not important. They are, and I understand the dilemma and the morale issue that can create. But hopefully, that people will sense that we're trying to help them by bringing in talented people that don't need as much training and things too. So.
Just one more reminder on retirement, that I think we've got another 6 years that it will continue to increase 12%
Right.
of our contribution every year. So that's a pretty significant increase over the next 6 years. That was set out by the General Assembly.
Absolutely, and we've done some forecasting on that. We know what it's going to cost us.
So, just appreciate all the feedback and comments, and I'll go back to this. When we started this venture together to try to help our community and help our workers, we had to be guided by data and structure. And every one of those jobs were compared apples to apples. Every one of those positions were looked at, and a median was developed for every one of those positions. And we compared it to 4 different sets of data to get it. And we want to pay people as much as we can, but our responsibility to the taxpayer is that we have data to support it. And JR, it bothers me, and we're never going to make everybody happy. But by being able to offer an experienced person that has years of using equipment, I didn't come up with that recommendation that you all just shared. That came up with Jeff's looking at data, and that was where it's at. And is that gentleman, is the recommendation a little higher than some other people that have been here? Yes, but we're trying to improve services by paying people what they are worth according to the data and median. And it bothers me that people feel like they're being disenfranchised and not respected, because that is not the case. We're trying to follow the data, and if the information that's being presented says that we need to look hard at CDLs and see, do we need to make a different category? But we have said from day one that this, we didn't start this and we're done with it now and wash our hands and walk away. We're looking at it constantly and reviewing it. And if something needs to be addressed, then we gather the data and present it. And my hope is that we can come back here at the start of October and consider some type of cost of living increase, because we did not do that in July with the start of the budget because of COVID. But looking at our revenues, I feel, and I don't want to overpromise anything, but I'm going to promise that at the start of October, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about this. I feel like it's very important to do that. And then, next spring when we start looking at our budget for next year, can we push 0 to 5 years, you're going to make 87.5% of the median instead of 85, and try to inch forward and move everybody forward. But I think we have a process. We have a professional that's driving the process, and it is what it is. There's nothing perfect. I will not pretend to be perfect. That it's infallible. There always has to be adjustments. But I think what we're doing is trying to help everybody, and it's a structured system of moving us forward. So that's my 2 cents. There's a recommendation on the table.
Motion.
A motion from Mr. Livingston. Is there a second? I have a second from Mr. Hostetler. Are there any other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you all. We'll come back.
Yeah,
Next.
And I'm not, the next two items on the agenda, I unfortunately don't have a name to present. I was hopeful that we would, but we'll postpone that till the next meeting.
So 12 and 13, we're going to skip down? I would rather do that than, move hastily. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So number 14, it's ordinance 20-07, first reading code enforcement update. And Rand, Jared have worked on this along with Devin Golden from the city. And Rand has prepared a summary, and I've spoken with Rand and Jared about it, and would invite any comments from Rand and Jared as well related to the update and why we're recommending the update as it is. Rand and Jared, do y'all have any comments to share in regards?
The main reason to do this, quite honestly, is to make us consistent with Sadieville, Stamping Ground, and Georgetown.
It's on the same page.
They've already, all three, adopted this, haven't they, Jerry?
Yes, they did this probably a year and a half ago. We're just cleaning up this document to make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah.
And it gets in accordance with state law.
And I want to thank Jared and Devin. We've been working on this forever, which is, quite honestly, is my fault. And without them, it wouldn't be ready today. So I really appreciate their help. I think overall it's better for property owners, and Jared can comment on this, because it gives them more of a chance to get things abated, and it does give some discretion for the penalties to be minimized, at least under certain situations. So,
Can I add something?
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt your stream, but correct me if I'm wrong, the only time that the time period is shorter is if they deem that it is a public safety, emergency public safety.
yeah,
Like,
that's right.
it's going to potentially, that's the only time but it actually gives a little bit more discretion to have a little more grace.
Yeah.
I'll let you continue with your stream. I'm sorry.
No, so I think, at least from a property owner standpoint, it is more lenient. At least it has that capability to be. So, but that's the main thing, to get us on the same page as the other municipalities.
And Rand, it also made the fines more compatible with the offense. So some of them in the early got way out of hand. And
Yeah.
you didn't want to see compounding fees for mowing the grass.
Yeah.
That's not what we want. We want to get up the cost. But we, you don't want it to get, extraordinary. And we wanted to make them more reasonable.
And I think maybe there have been some instances where that happened, Jerry.
Yeah, it happened early on. Like I said, there was a couple abatements for mowing grass, and these fees just compounded quite a bit. And we just want to capture what tax dollars we have in it. And of course, there has to be some administrative fees, but these fit the categories a lot better.
So, what questions or comments does any court member have in regards to this proposed revision?
It's my fault for not having more time to go through this, but some of my concerns, and they've been a concern for a while, is, and I'll highlight a couple things. We're talking about the time frame. It's the 7 days from the date of the citation being issued. It seems like the complaints I've had in the past, which I've had numerous, but I haven't had any really recently. But that 7 days, we have absentee owners, people that are out in the county. We have people that own farms that don't even live around here. And by the time that circulates through, sometimes by the time the homeowner or the property owner actually finds out about it, it might be 10 days, 2 weeks gone by. Well, there's already stuff happening and they don't even know about it. And then there are some some folks that live here in the county, but they work out of state and they're gone for a week or 2 weeks at a time. And I've had those things happen for folks. So I'm just wondering, you know, I've read the summary page, and I know it says in there that we dealt with some of the timelines, but I'm not sure that I understand it I'm looking at page 7, paragraph G there. Everything seems to be based on 7 days, and I'm just wondering if we don't need a little longer time frame on that. I don't think that's what this is trying to address. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Jared or Rand. I understand we're trying to get in line with the other cities that we're partners with. Is that 7 days, has that been the same the whole time? I'm looking at page 7, paragraph G.
I read that too. I would agree with you. I think 7 days is a tight window for a lot of people, even if you do get it. Sometimes, you know, you have life going on too.
It's from the
People work.
citation and they drop it in the mail, or they post it on the door. I mean, I've read through this thing pretty
I
extensively.
mean, and bottom line, we don't care if it's 7 days or 14 days. We want the whatever addressed, right?
Yeah.
And my big thing with this, if it is not a safety issue, if it's a safety issue, yeah, we gotta do something. But if it's
Right.
not a safety issue, we've gotta protect the rights of the property owners. And I don't think we're doing that. I've had, like Rick, I've had multiple occasions, complaints about how aggressive they've been out in the county. I'm not talking about a neighborhood we right next to a house. I'm talking 100-acre farm, 200-acre farm. If somebody sees something they don't like, I think they've been way too aggressive on numerous occasions. And we need to address that somewhere, because property owner rights come first, as long as it's not a safety issue.
Now, just a comment there. You know, you and I and Rick sat down and talked, and we had some conversations with staff, and we did have some, you know, when I first came into office, there was some, you know, numerous phone calls and items that needed addressed. In the last, you know, and I don't have, but in the last 10 to 12 months, the volume of that has gone down drastically. But regardless, we're going to be gone someday. We won't be here, and this ordinance will still be there. And your question is, and your question is that a good enough time period that allows our citizens time to respond appropriately? But ultimately, you're still going to get done what needs to be done. If there's a code violation, it's still going to be addressed. It's just giving people a little bit more grace and a little bit more time to address that.
Proper notification, make sure they know it
Yeah.
before you take
Right.
action. If it's not a safety issue, make
Yeah,
sure
listen
they
to
know
her.
it before you take action.
So that's what I'm hearing from you. Rand, you know, if we wanted to recommend a possible change in that window, we would have to, we want everybody to be on the same page.
Yeah, that's a problem.
So we don't have to, you know, I can take, you know, we can take this up and ask our colleagues, you know, if they'd be interested in doing that. Do you think a 14-day instead of 7
I don't know
days?
what the day limit is, and that goes back to a little bit too, like just mailing something and expecting, you know, like Rick, I think you were saying, you have some absentee people, you know, they own the farm and there's a house on the farm. They don't even live here though, so.
But what do you do then?
I don't know, how do we decide
Yeah,
what
I mean-
is communication, what is,
Well, here's another.
Jared, I don't know, you might be dealing with a lot with.
Well, and also too, that's the problem, and as we know, the mail is moving a little slower right now too, and I've heard some calls
Yeah.
about that. And two, maybe getting out on the front end, they got 7 days to contact the code enforcement officer and maybe appeal, go to the appeal board, maybe they disagree. But that's kind of a missing piece that I think has happened over the years, is just letting folks know that you can call and you'd like to appeal it because you want more time. But I don't know.
Is that not on the form? I thought that was.
There
Yeah,
is some-
but I just think sometimes people, when they get those letters, or
Yeah.
like they're saying, they're getting them after the 7 days.
Something good, if you steer it
Yeah, you do. You don't really comprehend all that. I mean, it is kind of alarming.
And you gotta sit with it all weekend long.
I do think sometimes
I mean, that's hard on people.
I do think sometimes with the slower movement of mail right now, I think it should be looked at, but I don't know how you get us all on the same page, Rand. That's a,
Say 7 days or 7 business days, because that doesn't
No.
make a difference if you're.
7 days.
I'll give you a situation.
Thursday, you can't do it on Friday, then you got Saturday, Sunday go by.
Yeah.
And now you're already on.
And you gotta take off work probably to deal with it.
Yeah.
I'll give you.
Mr. Wallace.
I'll give you a situation that happened to me. I had a dwelling that they came over and one of my renters did not mow the grass. But they also cited me for fence improvement. There was two pieces of fence that is a privacy fence that were out. They cited me. I got it had to be repaired by Wednesday. I got the notification on Tuesday. I then, because they did it on a Friday, I didn't get it till Tuesday because of the mail. I had to go find a piece of fence to repair. I went to Lowe's. I went to 84 Lumber. I couldn't find it here in Georgetown. So then I had to go to a different place to get that complied by the next day. Now, here's the reality. That mowing of grass is a different deal than if you have some other issues. And sometimes you need certain supplies that you might not be able to get. So here I am. I got it. I had 24 hours to get it fixed. Now, I know what you're all thinking is, okay, get your fence fixed beforehand. But the reality of it is there is some constraint sometimes to people trying to comply, whatever that may be. And it may be more than trying to get your lawnmower fixed or, something like that.
Or a health issue.
It could be a health issue.
So what if it is a rental property? Does it go to?
Property owner.
Do the, okay.
Registered property owner on
Okay.
PDA.
So essentially what has to happen is I have to go kick my renters in the rear end and get them going. But sometimes there's obstacles to that as well.
They are lenient though, because there's a house on Anderson
Yeah.
that has been called on multiple times, and it's been 8 months and nothing's been done.
Well, and we've got an issue out on Ironworks Road with a building being turned in, and it has been, judge knows about this, it's been close to a year. So I think there's some
There's a balance,
inconsistency.
Yeah.
There's the human part of it versus the.
Non-compliant, non-caring.
Yeah, to me, the answer comes in, you leave it at 7 days, but in the discussion with the people that enforce this thing, here are the practical considerations you need to keep in mind, and don't pounce. And I'm not saying they are. I couldn't tell you how it works. Jared probably could. Don't pounce the first day. And if you have some other method to contact them, and you may not, but if you have a phone number or whatever, try to talk to them and bring the problem to their attention.
That's not what the law says.
I understand, but we got to put some number in there.
Yeah, I know, but I also
I think
think there's
7
got to be
days
some
is too
flexibility.
tight. I do think 7 days is too tight.
So,
No matter how we do it, 7 days is too tight.
Rick Hostetler.
Well, that's why I said in the very beginning, I'm not sure that the conversation we're generating, which I think is good, is what we're trying to accomplish here. We're just trying to line up right now. I guess if it's taking this long for us to get to this point, maybe we could have these discussions and add, if we want to make changes. Because it'd be the same process, right? Then we go back to the city, the 3 cities, and they would have to say, oh, yeah, we agree with the timeline, or whatever we decide to do. But there's one other piece, or one other thing that I think would be beneficial for the county. And I don't think it's in here. I've read this thing, tried to read it all, tried to understand it all. And I'll give you an example that's actually ongoing right now. I don't want to give much detail because I don't have much detail, but there's a property that the fellow that owns is deceased. And there's been some issues, and we're still looking into that. Jared's been helping and others, but so I don't know all the details. But he had very little family, okay? And so that's a little bit about what I know about it, but there's been issues in code enforcement involved, so we're looking into that. But to me, in some of these previous things that have happened, going way back to last year, I don't see in here where code enforcement really would come to the county over some of these issues, because quite frankly, when you get a call from a constituent, we're the folks that are elected. So that's who they're gonna call, and then of course, there's always 2 sides to every story. But you're gonna hear your constituent side, and it's gonna be colored and so forth, and it would have been nice if code enforcement on some of these issues, because we could probably help. If they said, we're looking at this issue on this property, if they called the judge's office, to where we could get involved. And maybe cut it off and nothing, get it fixed. But I don't see where they're required to come to you, when I say you, to the judge's office.
No, they're not.
For things out in the county, because I think that's what we're elected for, to be that intermediary on these things. And I don't know how that would look, but a little bit of communication that way, and they're not required to, so this is not negative towards code enforcement, they're not required to, but I think it would probably actually help in some of the phone calls I've gotten in the past, because I'm hit, it's already way down the road, they got the letter late, they're trying to fix this, and they can't find stuff. I've heard all of it. And when I get the phone call, I'm going, what's happening? Well, they're threatening to find me and whatever. Whatever the conversation, I've had it all. And so it would have
So
been nice if
are you
code
asking for some sort of
enforcement-
reporting piece to be shared with Joe? I mean, is there,
Well, the
do we ask the
judge's
sheriff's office or
Yeah,
fire?
sometimes Jared could probably help, sometimes, sometimes the individual magistrate may, well, hey, I know of that family, let's see what's going on. I don't know what that piece would look like, but a little more communication, because in my view, I think you guys would agree, we're not really out, this is not put together to pound on our citizens, but yeah, some people have some issues and it needs to be cleaned up.
Right.
I get that.
Jared, what's your involvement now if there's a violation? Anything?
They do call from time to time, but I don't know of every one.
Okay.
In the past, when we've gotten to some of the more serious abatements they call, but like I said, I don't know every one. But Rick, I think it's something that maybe I can work a little closer with them as far as maybe just give me some brief information, and then once I get in the
Created a spreadsheet with your.
yeah, and I know they'd be willing to do that. I can call them and
Well, what they're trying to do is.
and then what I'd like to do when you get something in your district, I'd say, hey Rick, FYI,
What if they copied you in the letter? I don't think that you should micromanage them.
No, I don't want to, but
And I'm not asking for that either, but
Right.
they're trying to go by this. It's what the ordinance is, and I get that. And they're doing that, but.
we can work on something.
Right, I'm
So,
seeing some
okay.
glitches.
Has anybody, was this looked at with other ordinances from other communities?
Not to my knowledge, no.
What others are doing?
This is kind of a new thing, David. I didn't mean to
Yeah,
cut you off.
It might be a good idea to look at what others are doing, because they may be more lenient. So, kind of a example that goes along with this a little bit is when one of my insurance carriers goes and does an inspection at a school district, they'll do a hazard inspection, and they'll come up with this report. And they'll give it to the school turns around and gives it to me. And what we have to do is, they want all these things fixed, or it's
Right.
gonna affect your premium. But what we do is we take and we report back to them, this is what's happening, this is the ongoing project.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder what is our flexibility where, like, you can't find the stuff that night, or maybe somebody doesn't have a drill, or have the means to do it themselves, or doesn't have their motors broke or something. As long as they call code enforcement and say, hey, I know I've got this time or whatever, this is my situation, I'm going to get it taken care of. And then at that point, something like that should be put in the record at code enforcement. And that opens up the door to give them a little more time. But I think the thing is too, people have to take responsibility to make that phone call and say, I understand what I gotta do, this is my problem, I'm gonna be working on it, give me a little bit more time, and be reasonable about that time that it's getting worked on. And then, if it's not getting done, then at that time, you lay the hammer down. But people have to be responsible enough to pick up the phone and call code enforcement and say, I'm working on it, or I'm gonna have it done, or I've got a problem with it, that I can't get this done at this point in time. And this is the help out.
Actually, I think some of that goes on in code
Okay.
enforcement's defense.
They do.
Because I've told folks, have you communicated?
But my
That's the
question
key
is, are
point.
those things recorded in,
I think they are. Well,
They
I
are.
think they are.
like in a notes system or
Yeah.
something?
I
So
would-
that if they pull it up, they know that somebody's working on it.
Well, I don't work down there, obviously, but I think they do, because as I followed up with some of these issues, code enforcement, I've talked with them back and forth, and, they do what you said. But it usually always hinges on,
At 7 days.
well, somebody said it, when you get the letter from the government, you're panicked. And when you get it on the 6th day and the 7th day, you know, a lot of people don't, that throws them off.
The out-of-town property owner is a big one.
Yes, and so,
That-
I think that might be the key issue that I have.
Has it said certified mail?
No.
Well,
See, that's
yeah,
another
no,
thing.
it's
is How do
addressed-
you
It
know
can
they
be.
even got it sometimes?
Well, it's addressed in here. They talk about 3 or 4 different ways.
Yeah.
I think certified.
Regular certified personal delivery, leaving a copy of the order at the person's usual place of residence. So, yeah, there's a number of ways to do it.
Right. And so, anyhow, I just kind of want to bring up discussion. It may be a little bit off of what we're trying to do. I'm not trying to, but I would like to see us be able to sit down and have more of a discussion and maybe go through this. We've learned, and maybe we did. I thought we did have a document from another county or something when this first came out. What's
This
this
is the
been,
one
4
that
years
took
now?
a long time to get done, in 16.
Yeah.
It was 4 years. Yeah, 4
What,
years.
what I can tell you that I know about is, whenever that was, 2016, Andrew Hartley did one for the city of Georgetown. And I used that to do Sadievilles, and Glenn Williams and I used it to do Scott counties. So they're all based on that. And this, you know, it's still by and large that same document with some changes, obviously. And I don't know if he used some model, Rick. I suspect he had some kind of starting point.
My memory is that there was a starting point, but that may be off.
Yeah, I remember we had some conference we had to go to. I mean, it was just a one-day thing to talk about it. And I don't know if you got something
But
from
I
them.
think it's a great idea because, my memory says that they had some kind of starting document, but I could be wrong.
The problem you got is that if you want to get grace or you want to get leniency, you have to file an appeal to the code violation.
Make that call quickly.
And so then you gotta so now you gotta go through paperwork to just get more time. And that's the part where I see that is, you can eliminate that and still get more time without having to file the appeal. And you don't really, then you have to go to the front of the appeals board, but if you file the appeal, it gives you more time, and then you might get the issue resolved, and then you don't have to go to the appeals board. So it's that's the problem.
I don't regret saying this. Our landfill gets more leniency from the state.
I'm gonna move us along.
Strike that for the record.
Seriously.
I can only control what's, I'm gonna move us along.
I do think code enforcement tries to be handled with grace, everything I've seen from them. I think they do a good job of trying most of the time to work with people. And I've seen them work with some nasty situations.
Is just time frame. And then it just gets compounded when the citizen goes.
Yeah, a normal.
And out-of-town property owners is a big.
Until what you just mentioned, the situation that you shared with the court, I've not had anything, you know, I think that they are working very hard to err on the side of the citizen, but to what Alvin has said, you know, we have to want to respect personal property rights, and if you have a 14-day period in there instead of 7, then you have to feel like people have a little bit more time to respond. Is that what you feel like, Mr. Wallace?
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing, this is a revision that is before you. Do you want to hold on consideration of this revision and ask our colleagues about the possibility of one additional revision of that time period? Is that?
Can we do it first? Would that be a material change?
I think so,
Okay.
because it'd be doubling it. That's a good question, but and I guess the question I'd like to have answered, informally, and we're not taking a vote, but is the consensus that 14 days would be acceptable? Because I think what we need to do is go to the cities and say, hey, would you be amenable to?
They already adopted.
Yes, we're the last ones, yeah. Now, they can change it.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Well, they did quite a while ago.
Jared, do you have any idea how many citations they may
Page 7,
give out a month?
Item G.
I can get to.
I'm just curious.
I'd like to see
No,
that too.
I don't.
'Cause
Not on our end.
Well, I think a communication, and I don't know what the volume is, so this may not be realistic, but why wouldn't they be required just always to put a note on the front door, big orange envelope? And that, I mean, that's day one, they deliver it. And if it's a renter that lives there, hopefully they call their landlord and say, hey, I got a big orange envelope on the door here.
Is that along with sending a copy in the mail?
Right, but I'm just saying, that seems like that would give, that's immediate, but I don't know if there's enough time
I
to,
think that's in there.
well, I think it, but I don't know if they do it. I think it's an option to do.
I thought it was either or, but I could be wrong.
I think
Jared,
that's-
can we get some feedback to give Kelly and the rest of the court on that? Just the procedural, what's going on there, just to confirm it.
Because unless it's an abandoned property or an out-of-town person, then, yeah, but I think most of the time, people are probably going to see that pretty quick. And that may just help with this, and I'm not opposed to changing in 14 days, I think it's a good idea, but if it's not that much volume, I think day one, if they could drop that by the house, it'd be helpful.
Well, the other, are you talking about dropping it by the homeowner? or-
Wherever the violation is.
Right, well, so.
Taping it to the front door.
Along
Yeah.
along with that line, especially because we're talking about county business, so I know some of you guys represent all the city, or most of your districts in the city, but when you get out in the county, it's just a little different ballgame. You don't know if they got renters, they got nobody, they don't live there, they live out of state, whatever. So my thought is there ought to be one more piece, and that is out in the county, code enforcement, of course, corresponding with the court. That would allow an opportunity, if they go, look, we've had this complaint on this property on such and such road. I don't think that's too much to ask for, and then even the judge might see fit to say, hey, I'm gonna call that magistrate, as well as maybe I'm gonna get Jared's, well, I don't know. I'm just kind of role playing here, but I'd like to have that heads up, because I'm gonna be the guy that gets the call, and it's gonna be, I got this letter, and I got 1 day left. I've gotten those calls, and I'm going, well, I don't know what's going on. And by the time I can find anything out, they're probably past time. So I think we should consider even a little correspondence with the court type of piece. I don't know what that would look like or how you write it up, but.
I think that would involve us getting some training, because I'm not sure I can go out and advocate
It's not
for
that-
the person who's being charged or the person who's complaining.
Well, no, it's not, I'm not looking for it in that manner. I'm looking for it in, I know I can find out from folks, maybe that is an absentee landowner. I can probably find that out. I don't know how much time they spend on trying to find any of that out. Maybe they don't have time for that. I don't know.
But if we get in the middle of it trying to figure out who's right,
I don't know if it's our role.
No,
right.
I'm not trying to figure that out. I just want to make sure that the.
But I think that's what it's gonna lead to, don't you? If you call the homeowner and say, hey, you've got a tree or something down, or whatever the problem is, and they're like, oh, I'm out of state, I need, another month, and then would you go back and tell them I need a month, and you're like, can you do that? And code enforcement says, no, they've got 2 weeks to do that.
I don't know if this was right or wrong, but I got called by a constituent who's getting ready to complain on another constituent. And so I contacted, I said, well, listen, go ahead and call that in code enforcement. You got every right. I mean, that's your complaint. I didn't go up there and try to solve the issue. I just called that particular citizen and constituent and said, hey, the code enforcement's gonna be looking at an issue. I'm pretty sure you're probably gonna get a visit. And they did. But I gave them that heads up, and they go, oh, okay. So I actually called that guy last night, they worked all that out. But it's a communication piece, that's what I'm talking about. I told the guy, I said, I got no code enforcement, I got a job to do. Actually, the citizen that called me said, I've already called code enforcement. I said, fine, well, I appreciate that. I'll give those folks a heads up. I told them that. I said, I'm gonna give them my heads up. And that got worked out. That guy was ready for, he new code enforcement's coming, knew what the issue was, da-da-da. So that's all I'm talking about. I don't wanna go solve it for anybody. I just wanna make sure that they get notified, if I can, help, because, you know, I don't mind to go knock on a neighbor's door and say, you know who owns that farm? I tell them who I am, I've done this before, you know,
But-
just to say, hey, there's a notification out there.
Go ahead. I don't want to get involved in that, because if you miss doing it one time,
Oh, yeah.
and they get, and something you know, say it goes south really bad, not just a small fine or something, then at that point, what liability aspect does that put on us, because we haven't been consistent with doing the same thing with every citizen? And can we do it just for the county when this ordinance covers the whole, all the cities and everything?
And I'll go back, you know, the folks that are employed there are professional individuals. They are extra, you know, they're working through the document, following the, and I don't want to micromanage. I understand what you're saying. A code enforcement violation process is public record. You know, what I think what you're asking for is, you know, could they just send a distribution list out periodically that says these are the cases we're working on or something? Is that? Yeah,
Something along that
but
line, so that we don't get that phone call and it's already blown up.
yeah, but you know, but I'm also, I don't want to, along the lines of what David's saying, I don't want to get in the middle of it. If I can help and I have a relationship with them, maybe I could try to navigate, nip it in the bud, and that's kind of what you're saying. And I respect that, but at the same time, the process has to be driving, and it has to be fair for everybody. And I think I respect 100% what you all are saying. Do we need to extend that period before action is taken to give people a little bit more time? And I think it's something we can ask.
Is there a way to vote on the first reading? Because, yeah,
Yeah, that was
I was
what
trying to think
asking,
through
if
an
it was
amendment type
material
of, you know,
change.
just to that one.
Oh, I think you could vote on it substituting 14 days for 7.
But then you don't know if the other groups are
Yeah.
going to come back, yeah.
Well,
And
We should have first reading done. And only need second.
well, also, along this line, so this preparation for this coming to us is a year old.
No, every bit of it, yeah.
Well, but has code enforcement, wouldn't they have already been from the city of Georgetown, Stamping Ground, and Sadyville, wouldn't they have already been enforcing? Because those
They've already accepted
agencies
it.
have approved it, right?
Yeah.
So that's where we're sitting, if we want to make another change, and if they'll have time to agree with that or disagree or whatever, right? So,
So right now, they're enforcing 7 days,
Yeah.
right?
And in my mind, it's waited this long. If you all, it sounds like there's there's the concern about the 14-day period, or 7, whatever we want. I think the best avenue is for us to contact our colleagues and ask them if they would consider that additional amendment to this revision, and then we can move forward and bring it back at the next meeting. Is there a problem with that?
No, I think that makes sense.
One other comment, 2 of the complaints I've had have involved property owners that were deceased. Code enforcement went in and took abatement actions, significant abatement actions, while the heirs were trying to sort through the estate. I mean, that is just flat out wrong. It's just not.
Yeah, but how long had they been deceased, do you know?
I'm not sure of the timeline, but
That's my experience, that somebody's deceased. We've got a place that we get complaints about up on South 25, and the person bought it by land contract and has been dead for years, and now there's,
this is not yours, these 2 that I've talked about. are not
Like
yours.
Rand and I've met with the individual. I don't know what, I mean, the only other option is for us to
yeah, we've got a lien, file foreclosure on
we'd have
it.
to file foreclosure on it. And,
And we probably won't get paid because there are tax bills in front of us. It's not worth the county's effort to do that. And yeah, I understand what you're saying. You got to get in court, and right now that can take you a good 2 to 4 weeks, depending on what's going on. You know, I think they need discretion. And maybe that's easier said than done. Because every situation can be different. If they just died a week ago, that's one thing. If they've been deceased for years, somebody should have done something probably.
Is it they just maybe don't know that they just are just recently deceased? Is that what's probably happening with code enforcement? You know, they just don't know.
That goes along with what I was talking about communicating with the court.
And one of us might know that, hey, here's the situation.
Well, with all
Maybe.
of our wealth of knowledge. But, well, there is an issue that's ongoing right now that I'm talking about that is the fellow that's deceased earlier this year with almost zero family, from what I'm finding out. He's got some siblings. He's already been, code enforcement is involved and they've done some things. And I don't know all the details yet, so it's not what we're talking about, but the guy's deceased. And so that's.
So what kind of enforcement issues are we dealing with when we're talking about deceased? Are we talking about like the yards and stuff like that? Not
Well,
taking-
typically what happens, like property gets overgrown, in this case, it was multiple issues, not just one. Yeah.
They're just getting run down because nobody's living there.
Run down.
And then the notification's sent out, but nobody's getting it, and it's just so let's table this. Let me and Jared and Rand talk to our colleagues about changing that period, and then we'll bring this back at our next meeting.
Possibly, Judge, I think it's still worth discussing is some kind of communication in advance or while it's ongoing.
That might be more practice than ordinance. You know what I mean? That might be what we ask our code enforcement to do.
I feel like code enforcement folks are trying to go by, and that's what they gotta do. Their job is to go by this
But I think
ordinance, right?
I don't think that has to be written down. I think you can probably get that from just an ask.
Yeah.
You know?
Maybe so.
So, and we'll follow up with that as well. All right, moving on down, we'll table that and come back with information. No, we've got number
Yes, Rick.
15, Mr. Humphrey. Good morning.
My doctor's appointment.
Jeff Mudrack. There is a detention center new hire. I think Mr. Humphrey's going to present that information. Captain Humphrey?
Can you hear me pretty well?
Yes, sir, Captain Humphrey.
All right, well, it's the first time for everything, huh? Let's see here, I can figure out what my jailer wanted me to do. I have a Mr. Tristan. Am I going like that?
Lindsay.
Tristan.
Lindsay.
Lindsay.
yes.
Tristan Lindsay?
That's him, yes, Mr. Tristan Lindsay. Be hired part-time at $14 an hour. Pending the approval of the court.
Any questions or comments? Motion for Mr. Livingston to approve. Is there a second? I see a second from Mr. Rick Hostetler. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Captain Humphrey.
Thank you, sir, we appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Number 16, emergency shelter plan. I've shared documentation. We've talked about this. It's my belief that the court should consider the proposal on a trial basis for this upcoming year. We come back and look at it and with data and information as we go through the winter, and then of course once we get out of the winter. I've shared. Jeff did an estimate. We believe that the best path forward would be a recommendation of hiring 2 temporary individuals to serve, and you might need to have 3 just so you have, but you'd only have 2 working, and if the protocols go in place and the shelter gets activated, then you have 2 employees there that are working, covering the shelter through the night. And Jeff shared that documentation with you. I think it's $5,500 approximately if we had it open 30 nights, if it was activated. I shared Mike could not be here. And I told Mike to go, not to worry about it's his anniversary, and I said we can present this information. That's why he's not here. But he's done a lot of work and research, and I think it's a proposal worth the court's consideration, the court's time. So, what questions or comments does any court member have in regards to the proposal?
I'll make a comment. It just seems like the population of the people that we're trying to serve are probably in downtown area. And I guess we've exhausted all resources or asking if there's any downtown location that people could actually walk to.
Kelly, we've met and Mike met with several nonprofits. Don't know if we met with all churches, but Mike has communicated with the G-Tran folks about willingness to do like a pickup at the library and a pickup at another site here in town, and then in the mornings a pickup from the site and a drop-off back in town. That's been a conversation, but I can't say that we've talked to every church, but there has been conversation with nonprofits.
Well, I made this comment last time, and I just think it's logistics is tough because these probably aren't the people that aren't going to be at the bus stop exactly at 7 to get the ride. And I just don't know if it's going to be a consistent.
I don't disagree with you. That location was the low-hanging fruit. It's decent size. It's got 2 bathrooms. It's got a kitchen that could, with refrigerators that, the Amen House has had conversations and they're willing to partner and try to be a partner on delivering, some type of food, at the start of the check-in time. And they've also had other conversations with other nonprofits about when they do check-in time, kind of having people out here at the facility, talking about services, talking about how to help people. That's been a part of the conversation too. But I do hear you. It's not the most advantageous location. And are there any other locations?
I don't think it'd be like a bus stop pickup time. Usually when this happens, you're notified or Mike's notified.
They
And
would
the Amen
continuously
House
go.
knows where they are to get them there.
They would continuously run back and forth, wouldn't they? It wouldn't be just,
And only when the weather's below a certain temperature.
And here's my, like if the forecast calls for it, I don't have it right in front of me, but, like the white flag label comes from nonprofits, and I think the last other, locations to put a white flag out in front of their building to signify to folks that the shelter will be open tonight, and it's not just, social media or, and you have to do a PR campaign with that group of people to let them know, hey, this option's here. It's a process. I feel like, and I've personally driven people to shelters in Lexington. I just think it's something we ought to look at and consider. And it's not perfect, but it would be an attempt to help that segment of our community. Yes, sir.
And the employees would be seasonal?
Seasonal, what would we call them, Jeff?
Intermittent, I believe would be the.
So how does that fall with retirement? Because they're working, let's say they're working 12-hour shifts, but it's gonna be longer because if the shelter opens at 8 and closes at 8, they're gonna have to be there at 5:30, 6 o'clock. And then they're gonna be there afterwards cleaning up. So you're gonna have more than a 12-hour shift, which means that's less than 8 days a month. So are you gonna have a pool of people to?
That's what I said.
say,
You'd have
For
two.
100 hours, or I don't know how that works with the retirement,
Well, with-
so we don't get in trouble with that.
Well, with intermittent, I mean, they could be seasonal too, but with intermittent, as long as they average less than 100 hours a month, I mean, they can work more than 100 hours a month, but as long as their average over the months is less than 100 hours a month.
For a year.
Per year, then,
Okay.
then they're fine. And I think I had that even in the spreadsheet that it's,
But along those lines, David, it would be silly of us just to hire just two,
No,
because we need a pool of people that Mike can call on and say, hey, but we'd only have two on duty per shift.
So really, 50 per shift.
well, there's 14, it's 14 work hours. If you have an hour for lunch, then it's 14 work hours. And I felt like you can't have them show up at 6 when it opens. You got to be there a little bit early.
No, I'm with you.
Yeah.
What if you have an employee that wants to do it?
Full-time employee, you're not going to be able to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because
You're in overtime stuff then, yeah.
But then I guess they
Well,
would have to just change their shift, I guess.
Well,
is
I
what
was
you're
just
saying.
thinking like the fire department, if they've got their 48 off and it's gonna happen a scenario.
Yeah, that's true.
We couldn't do that, could we?
Well, we want to either. It's going to cost
Yeah.
us so much more, so.
Yes, sir.
I'm not in support of this, and the reason why is I believe that the county tax dollars go to nonprofits to provide this service, and I feel like that's why we've done this. The city and the county have contributed. I also am concerned about the liability that's being created by the county by setting up these types of situations, and that's just how I feel about it.
Respect that 100%. Sometimes we all have to, if the world would agree to disagree and still love each other and move forward, we would be so much better off.
That's right.
You still
And
love Chad, don't you?
I still respect Chad.
He just said
I just,
love, didn't he?
no, I love Chad. And respectfully, we have to agree to disagree, and that's okay. But that's why we're elected, and that's why we're all here. And I'll go back to what I always say. It's my job to bring information and items to this court, and then we collectively move forward. And what I respect about this court is we work together, and sometimes we agree to disagree, but we try to do what's best for the community. And yes, sir.
I hadn't even thought about that, because we do give a lot of money to nonprofits, and that's not really talked about a lot. Also, is there, from that aspect, removing the liability from the county and the safety measures and issues and all that, the possibility of having a grant program for someone to do it, as opposed to us hiring someone because they're going to be on our work comp, us assuming the liability on it, and having a grant program to where we help fund the employees, maybe we provide the space, but,
Can we rent the space for $1? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I don't know why I'm looking at you about the space, I should be looking at you about the space. I mean, I don't know, because it would make sense to me that a nonprofit handle it, so that we don't involve everything that, to put that on our own staff and the liability on our own taxpayers. Because at that point, they would name us as additional insureds on their liability, on all of that, and it would take a lot of that off of us.
Could Transform Scott County or somebody like that do this same thing?
Doing a grant program, which would get us to the same place.
I'm sure it's a possibility.
You'd get us to the same place possibly, but
6 to 1, half dozen to the other.
Am I right, Joe
And-
Patton, thing that, didn't you all look at some program in northern Kentucky that did something?
Yeah, the city of Covington runs the shelter.
And they do it, the city does?
They pay for it, yeah.
And that's where Mike's modeled this from.
But do you?
But if we gave,
Are we gonna overwhelm Transform Scott County? Do they have the resources? Or, are we?
I've not asked the question. I could certainly ask the question.
If we provide some of the fence, I guess, for them to be able to play ball in, will they be able to handle that type of work? The amount of money that we were going to spend on it, do you just give that money to you know, the 5,500, or 6,000, you just give that to Transform Scott County?
Earmark it for.
Earmark it for them every year?
Is that something this court wants me to pursue?
I think so, and I'd love to see them talk to
I want to see us
possibly
do the effort,
downtown.
but if
yeah.
that makes more sense, you know, like Joe and I have talked about, when we've taken, you know, 18-year-old kids or 16-year-old kids that don't have a place because of bad homes and all that stuff, we have to take them to Lexington. You know, that's a shame that we have to do
I'm
that.
taking kids to Salvation Army, I'm taking kids to Catholic Action Center, and y'all, it's not just isolated. I mean, it's a yearly thing.
You'd be amazed how many Scott
They're all
County
nonprofits.
kids are homeless. I mean, it's just.
You're 100% right. But to this point, you know, to that point, the city of Lexington, it's my understanding, and let me just, before I say something I'll gather information to see how much the city of Lexington gives to the Hope Center, how much the city of Lexington gives to the Salvation Army to do that. And if y'all want to pursue this route and see if Transform Scott County or some other
The Gathering Place.
some other nonprofit, you know, the Gathering Place runs a shelter as we speak, but there are they have some, they call them barriers. If there's issues related to the individual, that it keeps them from being able to go in. This is what Covington did, is a no-barrier shelter. If somebody can walk in and lay down on a couch or a cot, then they're going to let them come. So what it sounds like to me, before we, take a vote on this, do you want me to see if there's any nonprofit that would consider the support of the court to run it?
I think we have to.
Is that what you're saying, Kelly? Is that what
I
you're
think that's
saying?
a great idea.
It's probably prudent to do that.
David,
We
Chad,
still have time, right? I mean,
would you support it if a nonprofit took the responsibility?
I mean, Mike seems to be ready to roll. And
Yeah, it depends on the conditions.
Okay.
I mean, if the goal, and the other thing is you talk a lot about data and basing things on data. What's the data say on how many people we're serving? And I asked that question based on, if you work out a deal with the Gathering Place, how many beds will you hold open for these types of?
They're maxed out as we speak.
Yeah.
They're maxed out. Yes, sir.
It's all good conversation, and I shared this in the workshop. My wife and I, we don't now, but we did for a number of years in Lexington with a church in downtown. And that kind of blows up when people find out there's a spot to come to. That will get out. Now, I don't know what it'll look like here, and I do want to help these folks. I don't want to see anybody freezing to death on our streets. Quite frankly, we had a lady who didn't want the help, living in a hollowed out log 2 winters ago right beside our church. She didn't want the help. She don't want to come inside. It's amazing. I don't even know how she survived it. She's been in our community for a decade or more, if I'm not mistaken. But I think this is all good conversation, and we do have the building that someone potentially, like a Gathering Place or maybe a church or maybe 2 or 3, and we can try to work hand in hand with them. It would kind of, in my mind, potentially relieve liability, but there are folks out there that would probably kick this idea around, and we're early enough before the season gets here. I think it's worth looking into.
I'll make calls and I'll have information to share before our next meeting, but we can't wait past that, I don't think, to help people make plans, and that's including ours. And if the will of the court's not to support this venture, it's the will of the court. My job's to bring options and items to the court. Bill Burt.
Judge, I'd like my fellow magistrates, about middle of December, to take a small blanket and go out and sleep on the back porch overnight. Just once. I spent 26 years in the Army, and the last 4 of it with the 10th Mountain Division, and we spent a lot of cold nights out there. And I've got to tell you, when you're cold, your soul is cold. I support this. I think it's the right thing to do. Now, whether we administer this or we have a nonprofit that administer this, I think is the question. I think we have the facility, we have the funds, we have the desire. We just need someone to run this for us. I think that's where we need to be on this. But I've got to tell you, I deal with homeless people every day, and I see them every day. And in the summer months, it ain't bad. But I promise you, Baker, when the snow flies and it gets cold out, you'd be surprised the places they will go to try to stay warm. And Salvation Army does it here in Lexington, and Lexington probably has a half a dozen shelters that they can send people to. Scott County has none.
Bill, thank you.
So good a little bit.
So it sounds like the desire of the court is for us to see if there's a partner that would be willing to possibly navigate and operate what we've described as a white flag cold weather shelter. And I'll bring that back to the court information to share
Do you
at
think
our.
the gathering place could lift their restrictions when the temperature's below?
I don't think so in their setting. I don't
Well,
think that-
they don't have space, I don't
I don't
think.
think that even has,
Like as we, like they're,
for that type of issue.
yeah, it's not, they're maxed out as it is, I think, when it, especially when it gets cold.
And we also have to think through, I mean, we're trying
Where are
to
they?
dodge
Are
some
they at
liability,
one?
but those
Or they
nonprofits
sort
have
They're on
liability
Bourbon
issues
Street.
too. So, I mean, somebody's gonna have liability. You know, so are we gonna put that on churches and nonprofits, or are we gonna do it as a government, as people, you know? So, I know we wanna always try to hide from liability as much as we can and try to diffuse that, but at some point, it's our job to take on some liability too.
Well, here's what I like about the nonprofit. If it's, and I keep going back to downtown, because to Bill's point, and I agree, it'd be miserable to be outside when it's cold, but I don't know the difference between 25 degrees and 20 degrees.
It's cold.
It's cold. And if you got a volunteer group that's got a mission to help people and they're downtown, maybe they can open that day. And and then it's the issue of the food. Are we going to have food? Is it going to be volunteered sometimes? Is it not going to be volunteered? I think you got to at least have something out there. If you're going to house people for 12 hours, have some food and drinks.
The Amen House is, you know,
I think they're gonna do that.
they're going to do that.
They've committed.
Yes, they've
Okay.
had conversations and, you know.
Well, that's good, and I support the idea.
sack
I just
lunch
think
or-
it's just, if we could get something downtown, I keep going back to that, because I just think these people are, it may be 10 o'clock at night before they decide they want to try to go get shelter.
Get the sidewalk to 25.
But,
high school week.
but what,
Well,
yeah.
I mean,
But
people could walk out there.
The issue that Mike brought up that Covington experiences, you know, they have an intake time and then they, you know, and if you leave, you're not coming back.
Right.
And I don't know all the, I don't know all the ins and outs, but they've done it for several years and they've found that that's the most successful, you know, and I hate the idea like, oh, you missed the bus, you're gonna have to sleep outside. But,
We can't do that.
I mean,
We'll
that's,
pick them up.
yeah.
Rand, is this an interlocal agreement?
No, I don't think so.
What's that?
This
Would
white
it be an
flag. This is-
interlocal?
we're
Well,
taking
if
this on.
EMA was running it, it was gonna be interlocal, and I've talked to Mayor Prather, and Mayor Prather, you know, he supports it, just has to navigate through the process too, but he thinks it's a promising ideal as well. And that, if we don't do it through EMA, then if we're gonna ask a nonprofit, you know, we could certainly ask the city of Georgetown to partner with us, but, you know, if EMA was running it, then it is through an interlocal. That was what, and I've had a conversation with Mayor Prather, and he felt like it was a promising idea, but would just have to navigate through it. Yes, sir.
Well, along the line of Lieutenant Kelly's thought process there, one thing we experienced is once you set the guidelines up, it doesn't take a long time that community, the word gets out, folks show up, but they also know, hey,
These are
closing
mine.
the doors at 6 o'clock. Now, there's got to be some exceptions, obviously, but in general, you'll find out that that those folks in that situation they'll show up. Usually they were lined up outside the building, waiting on the doors to open. But it took a little time, and then it all leveled out. For the rest of the winter, it all leveled out, usually the same faces. Add a few, take a few away, or whatever, and they were always there timely. Now, did sometimes stragglers? Yep. But, you know what I mean? It's
a ebb and flow, and
where the facility's at, wherever it's at, Kelly's correct, and I think we'd all agree. If it's downtown, that's most accessible to folks that are in that situation. But they'll learn. They'll do.
all right, I'll bring that back to us. And then on new business, I just want to mention, I followed up this week with CTC Technology about that proposal. And yes, that initial proposal of up to $15,000 was just to get us ready and address, I don't have it all right here in front of me, but it makes us, it develops a plan. And then once we have a plan and have that analysis and we see the way we want to pursue it, then they would go into step 2, phase 2. It's just actually writing the grants, and that cost you all. Broadband is not cheap, and neither is this. She estimated 25 to 30 to get that done.
To do the step 2.
Yeah, to do the step 2. So I am still waiting on a proposal from Learn Design Apply. That is another company, so we'll have something to compare with. I've spoken with Geo Partners, who is actively doing our analysis as we speak, and I want to share just a piece of an email that we got, and I asked him at Geo Partners if they had all the information they needed from us, and they were waiting on some information from Step CG about the exact technology that they'd be using if they developed a private LTE. So they're waiting on that, but he said, I've started the study without those specs complete, and I am amazed that without much effort, we can cover 77% of the households using 5 gigahertz unlicensed technology. That's off-the-shelf, lower strength technology from his estimation. Now, that's just his initial information. And then I followed up about, I said, I'm hoping that we could have a look at a blended approach so we could have stuff to compare for, a blended approach to getting fiber to the home where there are clusters, and then, a wireless solution where there's more isolated, like where you're way out in rural Scott County, where it wouldn't be feasible to run fiber to every single home. And his reply was, in terms of your study, you will be getting a model that is 100% wireless, a different model which is 100% fiber, and a few other models, multiple models, which are a mixture of fiber and wireless. So when we get this back, you can see different price points for different options, which will help us jointly focus on what the most affordable network would be with and without a grant. So just trying to let you all know we're still getting that. And
Joe, did he give you like information on our survey and what kind of results they got?
No,
because I've had some questions about that, like
the speed test.
Yeah, the speed test.
3,900 speed tests were used, and he's using that data, and he's even made a comment in an email somewhere.
Results on that, really?
Well, all they did was they take that data, and they're using it as part of this analysis to give us the estimates. And it shows us where we have connectivity and where we don't.
Good in responses?
No, it was excellent.
Okay.
He said it was very, very helpful. And then I hope I really had hoped by today we'd have this, but it's not here. So I'm hoping by our next meeting we'll have that. I have one thing that I want to talk to the court, just following up with my way I try to do business. Step CG has asked me for a change order on our network. There's two things I want to talk to you about, and one only right now that I want to just, I can do it myself, but if the court wants to make a motion to approve the change order, I would probably appreciate that, because that's the way we've done, the way I've done business with the court up through here, and I had it right here in front of me. Here it is. So the Step CG's asking for a change order for 3 items. Well, it's really more than that. It's 2 Extreme Networks. It's a switch, and it's AL 3600 A15E6. Those are $2,300 total. Then there's another Extreme Network switch, AL 36 A16 E6. There's only one of those. Total of $1,800, $76, and then some additional cable drops that were needed that were beyond the scope of what they originally looked at. There was 12 at $300 for $3,600, so it's $7,784.04. It's legitimate. I've talked to them numerous times.
In this building?
Well, it's there's the cable drops are out of EMA, I think, is what he mentioned in the email. But just to be, and I've talked, they did a lot of cable drops that we're not getting charged for. We've had conversations about that, and that was, I said the bid was the bid, and we've stuck by it. But this, I think, is legitimate. I feel like we need to have this to finish up the part of the network that we've talked about getting done. If somebody wants to make a motion.
Make a motion, we do that.
All right.
What was those part numbers on mine?
So we got a motion and a second. Is there any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So I'll sign that and send it in. Now here's a piece, and I'm not asking for any action. I'm just wanting the court to know what I'm working on. As we finish up this project to get the network finished, I started looking at how much it costs to have 500 meg or 50 meg of fiber at the sheriff's office, the jail, the county attorney's office, all these things right here in this short distance around the courthouse. Well, in this same conversation along the same lines, they've been talking about a big project of providing private LTE to the county to make connectivity for students and government easier, and it's a bigger scope. But they have talked with me, and I'm still waiting to get some final documents, and then I'm waiting on Geo Partners to kind of tell me, because they're going to use the Step CG information to make an analysis too. So I don't want to do anything without having all the information. But one path that we could take to finish up our network work is to make a private LTE network hubbed out of the courthouse. And instead of paying, you start looking at costs on a monthly basis for fiber, for like 50 meg fiber circuit from Spectrum. It's like $650 a month. And you multiply that by 7 locations, that recurring cost is pretty high. My hope, within a month and a half, that Kentucky Wired, they've told me and Chad on the phone that within a month and a half, they'll be able to tell us how much it'll cost and when we can hook up. And no, we could get the fiber that's here in the courthouse, and it would supply the hub of a private LTE network that the jail, county attorney, all of our offices within a 2-mile circle, and we'd have to pay for the original startup of the private LTE, but then we're going to pay a reduced rate, hopefully, from Kentucky Wired, and Chad sitting on that conversation. And overall, we'd have a big savings. Now, the other piece that I'll bring back to you, I've reached out because what Step CG says is, well, you can sell your service to the city of Georgetown, planning and zoning. And you can let them hook up to your network to provide connectivity, and they pay us. So I don't have all the data for you yet, but I hope by the next meeting I do, and some avenues for you to consider. I don't think, and I wanted to talk to Rand, they're designing the network as that professional services.
Yeah, I think so.
So that's what I think as well. So with that said, that's the last piece I had. Does anybody else in our court have anything? And, we did mention the next meeting's on the 24th at 7. I don't think Alvin would be in support of changing that time. You want to stick with consistency?
Consistency and done that, we treat it as special meeting.
Yeah. So, if somebody has a conflict, we can Zoom them in. We'll leave it at 7. I do want to say that starting after Christmas, when we consider next year's calendar, I would not mind changing that time back to 6. That's my 2 cents right now. Just if y'all think about it, tell me what you think as we get closer.
I think most of the other meetings, city council, planning and zoning, they're all start at 6, I believe.
So
It would fall in consistency with.
if somebody wants to get here, most of the time they can get here at 6.
Have you all always done Thursdays? That's what gets me.
Thursdays at 7.
Thursdays are tough for me. So.
Well, and the reason, I think part of that, because we've looked at the Thursday a year or two ago or something, and then trying to fall in between planning and zoning, city council.
So, but we can talk about all that as we move forward. Anybody have anything else? With that said, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion from Kelly Corman, second from Dwayne Ellison. Thank you, Bill. Good to see you. Motion, we are adjourned.